All right, so you're looking for knowledge, right? You want that deep understanding.
Yeah.
But you don't want to wade through tons and tons of information.
Nope.
Right? That's where this deep dive comes in. We're going to break down this idea of transformational development today. Basically, how can communities in really tough situations create real and lasting change?
Yeah, and specifically, we're going to a remote part of Africa for this one. What's fascinating is that this community wasn't just facing challenges, they were practically invisible to, well, the government and most aid groups.
So imagine this.
Right.
No clean water, no health care,
Yeah.
no decent schools for their kids, forget enough food. They even lacked local churches. The government, totally absent.
It's a picture of real hardship.
Real hardship.
But here's where it gets interesting. Our sources tell a story of incredible progress. And it was triggered by, the approach of a Christian aid organization.
Okay.
So Samuel J. Voorhies, he spent decades in international relief and development. He's going to be a big part of our conversation.
All right, so today, we're going deep into transformational development. What does it even mean? And how is it different from other ways people try to fight poverty? So first things first, what was it like when these aid workers first arrived?
So picture this. The aid workers arrive in this isolated, struggling community. And despite all the hardships you described, they are met with an incredibly warm welcome.
I remember reading about a song. They sang about the community taking charge of their own development.
Yeah, up with the development, we can do it ourselves. And
Yes.
that right there captures something huge about this approach. The people themselves, even with so little, they have this inner strength and this drive to make things better. They have the spirit, the desire for a brighter future.
It really sets the stage, doesn't it? It's not outsiders coming in with all the answers, but working with people who are already yearning for change.
Yeah.
So after that warm welcome, what were some of the first, real, tangible changes?
It's important to visualize these changes. So water first. Their water source was basically a dirty pool shared with animals. Imagine the diseases, especially for the kids.
Constant sickness, I bet. Did they see a drop in specific illnesses after they got a well?
Absolutely. Waterborne illnesses, diarrhea, dysentery, those are really dangerous for little ones. Those plummeted. And the change, a new well, concrete slab, so it's hygienic, a fence to keep the animals out, and a pump, so clean groundwater. The impact was immediate, huge. One woman said her children are much healthier now. It's not just getting a well, it's becoming a healthier community. And that's key to this kind of development.
Makes sense. If kids aren't constantly sick, they can go to school. Parents can focus on other things. Speaking of, what about food? That was another big issue, right?
Huge. One farmer talked about how he got better seeds, and they trained him, showed him better planting techniques, how to use organic fertilizers, and his corn harvest doubled.
Wow, doubled. So he could feed his family and...
Not just that. He said the extra corn, he could sell it, pay for his kids' education. He even dreamed of saving up, buying oxen so he could farm even more land. It's this cycle of improvement right at the individual level. This is what we call microeconomic development.
So he's not just surviving anymore, he's planning for the future, investing in his kid.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And then there's education, trying to learn under a fig tree on the ground.
Yeah, can you imagine? No shelter, no desks, no materials. How do you focus? They built a new classroom, desks, a chalkboard, the whole thing. And one student said, now we are able to learn our lessons much better. I mean, just having a proper learning environment makes a world of difference.
So we've seen these concrete improvements, water, food, education. But I feel like for the community, the biggest change was even deeper than that. What did they say was the most significant thing?
It wasn't about the physical things. They said, we are together now and organized to help ourselves. We can meet and talk about our problems and how we can solve them together. It's a total shift. They went from feeling helpless to being problem solvers. That's the heart of transformational development. It's not just about getting a well, it's about becoming a community that can identify and address its own needs now and in the future.
That feeling of we can do this ourselves is so powerful.
It is. And they even said, we don't have to wait on the government. They're not dependent anymore. They're empowered. And this empowerment, it extended to the women in the community. Their roles, the respect they received, it all changed.
I was going to ask about that. How did things change for the women? That's often a big part of development work, isn't it?
Big time. The women said they felt, loved and valued by God. They were recognized for what they could contribute to the community. They said their husbands started treating them better. They had more time with their kids, even the men drinking less. These social and relational changes, they're all tied in with those material improvements we talked about.
It's not just about infrastructure. It's about a shift in how they see themselves and each other.
Yeah.
So this leads us to the philosophy behind it all. Holistic Christian transformational development. Let's break that down.
So development, it means it's intentional, guided. It's about facilitating positive change, not just letting things happen randomly.
And transformation, that's more than just building a well or a school, right?
Right. Transformation is change that impacts the whole person, materially, socially, spiritually. And it's a whole community, too. Economic, social structures, how they engage with the wider world. It's deep, it's multi-layered.
And Christian, how does that fit in?
The Christian part is the foundation. The belief that people, individuals, and whole communities can be deeply changed, becoming more Christ-like in their values and actions. Our source mentions 2 Corinthians 3.18 about being transformed into his likeness. It's not just trying to be like Christ, but believing that Christ himself brings real positive change when kingdom values are lived out. There's this great quote in our source, simple efforts by ordinary people bring about marvelous changes. It's not about huge top-down projects. It's about empowering people on the ground, guided by these Christian principles.
Okay, so this holistic Christian transformational development is one way to approach poverty, but there are others, right? Our source has this matrix comparing different strategies. Can we go through those?
Absolutely. It's a helpful framework. It looks at two things. The focus, is it about meeting immediate needs or fixing the system? And the method, does change come from outside, or is it facilitated from within?
Okay, let's start with strategy I, economic growth. This one often uses external aid, right?
Yeah. Think financial assistance, technical support coming from outside. And they measure success by things like income per person, the balance of trade, like big international organizations implementing structural adjustment programs, reducing government debt, cutting spending, opening up markets, that kind of thing.
So the goal is to improve the economy overall, and eventually everyone benefits.
That's the idea. Stable economies lead to more trade, more production, everyone prospers. But the source points out that in the short term, these policies can cause problems like job losses and inflation. And the poor often suffer the most. Plus, what worked in some Asian economies might not work everywhere else.
So while acknowledging the importance of the global economy, our source suggests that Christian efforts have often been more about microeconomic development, helping individuals and small businesses directly.
Exactly. There's this example of a woman in Malawi. She got a small loan, started her own bakery. With just that little bit of money and some training, boom, successful business. Sent her kids to school, even gave back to her church. She said it was God's grace that made it happen. That's the connection between practical help and spiritual faith.
So that's strategy one. Now strategy two, political advocacy. How is that different?
So economic growth tries to work within the system. Political advocacy, it challenges the system, challenges governments, unfair trade policies, the whole thing. It's about changing laws, policies, systems, locally and globally, to make things more just and fair.
So things like lobbying politicians, raising awareness, even protests and stuff.
Exactly. The source mentions how Christians have historically been involved in things like land reform and abolishing slavery. And while it's still important for Christians to fight for justice, the focus here is on empowering local people to lead the change in their own communities and countries. Outsiders can help, but the drive needs to come from within.
But our source says there's a potential problem with this approach if it's not combined with other things.
Right. You can change laws and systems, but they're still run by people. If those people aren't also transformed their hearts, their values, then things like corruption can undermine the whole effort. Working for justice is vital, but it's more powerful when combined with internal transformation.
That makes sense. So strategy three, relief. This is what most people think of when they hear humanitarian aid.
Yeah. It's about meeting immediate needs during emergencies. War, famine, natural disasters. Christian organizations do a lot of this, but our source emphasizes that relief is temporary. It's not the same as long-term development.
Because the danger is that people become dependent on it. The source even mentions rice Christians.
Right, people who might only say they believe to keep getting aid. It says relief should be unconditional. Like Christ's love, John 13.34-35. The goal is to save lives, prevent starvation, and create the stability needed for long-term development to happen. There's this powerful story of a nomadic Muslim man. He was deeply moved by the unconditional help he received from a Christian relief camp. It's a beautiful picture of selfless giving in a crisis.
Okay, so relief is crucial, but not a long-term solution. Which brings us to strategy four. Transformational development. That's what we saw in our first story. What sets it apart?
This one takes a long-term, holistic view. It's about tackling the root causes of poverty and injustice, recognizing that the problems these communities face are complex and interconnected. No infrastructure, healthcare, clean water, education, it's all tangled up. But the key difference, transformational development emphasizes change that comes from within the community. Local people are the leaders. They own the process of improving their lives and their community.
So it's not just about giving resources, it's about building capacity, self-reliance, empowering them to create their own future.
Yes. And the biggest transformation happens in their values, their beliefs, their vision. They start to believe in themselves, in a better future. They rediscover their worth, their dignity. And embracing kingdom values is seen as central to this kind of deep, lasting development.
So there are a lot of pieces to this. Our source lays out 10 fundamental principles of holistic Christian transformational development. Could you walk us through those, just to give our listener a clear picture?
Okay, so these principles are the framework for how it works in practice.
Okay.
First, the value of people. Recognizing that everyone has inherent worth and dignity within their specific culture.
All right, number 2.
Understanding and respecting local culture. You affirm individual value, but you also engage with the culture thoughtfully. What aligns with biblical principles and what might be holding them back?
Number 3.
Believe in people's capacity to contribute. Everyone, no matter how poor, has skills, knowledge, something to offer. You empower them to use those things with dignity.
Okay.
Number 4, people over technology. Don't just impose tech solutions from the outside. Local people need to be involved in the decisions.
Number 5.
Poverty is multidimensional.
Right.
It's not just about money. It's spiritual, social, relational. You have to address all of it.
Okay.
Number 6, communicate Christ through word, deed, and sign. Share the gospel, show love through actions, and let the transformative power of God's kingdom be evident in tangible ways.
Okay.
Number 7, all interventions carry a message. Be mindful of how your actions are perceived. If you just hand out aid with no local involvement, the message might be you're helpless, but working alongside them says, we're partners, we respect you.
Number 8.
God is already at work. Look for the good things already happening. The local strengths, build on those.
Okay.
Number 9, transformation through relationship with Christ. Lasting change, individually and as a community, comes from knowing and following Jesus.
And number 10.
Churches are foundational. Healthy churches are vital for sustaining transformation. They build community, offer spiritual guidance, and live out kingdom values in the world.
These principles really show how comprehensive and empowering this approach is. It's not a Band-Aid. It's about deep, sustainable change from the inside out. Our source ends with a great example. The Ansokia Valley in Ethiopia. Can you tell us about that?
Ansokia Valley. It's a remarkable story. 1984, famine, people dying left and right. But a transformational development program changed everything. Now they call it a garden of hope. Over 7,000 households, about 45,000 people, lifted out of extreme poverty. They introduced things like terracing and water harvesting, which made a huge difference in soil fertility and water availability in that really dry area.
That's amazing. 45,000 people. What other changes did they see besides the agriculture?
They embraced better farming methods, improved their livestock, and did a lot of reforestation. Now they have a reliable food supply and a healthier environment. But it wasn't just physical. Around 700 people became Christians, and they built the first church in that area. It became a center for the community.
I remember that story of the man who was against it at first, but then he was completely won over by how dedicated the workers were.
Yeah, he said he was so moved by their commitment to the whole community, not just physical needs, but spiritual too. They prayed while they worked. He saw their genuine care and dedication, and it touched his heart. He became a Christian and joined the effort. And the author, he got to see this transformation firsthand, from death and despair to a vibrant, hopeful community.
What a powerful example of what this kind of integrated long-term approach can achieve. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway about transformational development?
It's this. To create real, lasting change in communities facing huge challenges, you need a holistic and sustained approach that empowers people from within. It's not just handouts, it's about fostering social connections, spiritual growth, and giving people the tools to shape their own future.
And it all hinges on truly valuing people, respecting their culture, and believing that they can contribute to their own progress.
Absolutely. It's about practical solutions and a shift in values and worldview. People realizing their worth, their potential as God created them.
So to you, our listener, think about these principles. Recognizing value, fostering capacity, addressing the whole person. How might they apply to challenges and opportunities in your community or your sphere of influence? What seeds of change might be waiting to be nurtured with this perspective? Definitely something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.